Hi, Luke.
Hi,
I'm Marcell, and here with me my interview partner, Nikolett. And
nice to meet you.
nice to meet you too. We are both studying film history and theory at ELTE, and we're really glad you could spare some time for this Zoom interview with us, so we can talk about your latest film, The Propagandist. Um, so I was really impressed by the incredible amount and the variety of archival footages in this film. And I think how you use them is the core of the movie. So my first question would be related to this. So just in general, how did you find these materials and what was the process of the digitalization?
And yeah, it started with a CD that was given to me by my mother-in-law, and her neighbor brought her this CD with a recording of a Dutch fascist. The recording was from the 1960s. So after the war, there was a project in the Netherlands by a Dutch historian who started out with oral history. And this at the time was a new idea. He was a pioneer in the Netherlands, a historian just going throughout the country with a recorder and a microphone to talk to people from recent history. And I think for a long time, history, when it was taught in academia or in universities, it was really about distant past, so more about the Roman Empire and this kind of thing. And so in the 1960s, or maybe after the war, they started also investigating recent history or contemporary history. And this Dutch historian, Rolf Schuursma, had the idea of interviewing Dutch collaborators and fascists just to hear what their motivation had been to be part of this regime and to support this German occupation, and also the fascist or Nazi ideology. And this CD also, I was confused because it was something that I had never heard before, and I had done a lot of research specifically to this person also that was on the tape. So I started looking on the internet for sources where this interview came from, and then I found a document that described these interviews by the Dutch historian. And it took us quite some time. I worked together with a historian and researcher, Rick Binnendijk, but luckily for us, the tapes had been archived and they were at the Dutch Sound and Vision archive, but they had never been digitized. So they helped us by digitizing them, and that was the first time that we could actually hear and listen to the tapes. And it was 8 hours of interview, so there were three long sessions of interview, and that was the beginning of this film, actually listening to these audio tapes.
Yeah, so to follow up on that, you said that these archival footages went through the process of digitalization. Um, and I've also read that you had to do some restoration works. So I'd like to ask to what extent were these materials manipulated? So, like when working with these types of footages, where did you draw the line between necessary restoration and like altering the original image?
Yeah, this is a question of calibrating. We were able to go back to, with the film archive, to go back to the 35 millimeter copies. So the protagonist of the film, Jan Teunissen, or antagonist, I should say, he was filming himself and his family already before the war on 35 millimeters. And these family films, they were also archived. And the first thing that we did, and I really wanted to do this, is to go back to the original. So not to the scans that had been made in the meantime, but really to go back to the 35 millimeters scans, film and scan them, so we could have a really pristine and crisp image. And I think it helps also the experience, especially when you go and watch this film in the cinemas, there is so much more detail. So these scans were already quite good. And then after that, we did a round of digital restoration because there is a lot of just artifacts, also noise in the images. And one kind of a problem came up in editing the film is that we didn't have so much material of the main character himself in the image. So what we experimented with was just slowing down certain film images for like on 5% of the original speed. And this is where we did manipulate the image. It hadn't been shot like this. It's like super slow motion images. But I felt that we needed these kind of images to tell the story that I wanted to tell. And I think also to the audience, it's obvious that it's almost like you're crawling into his head. So it's so slow motion, it's almost like a picture. And it gave us the opportunity to use one shot that's originally 3 seconds. Probably it's now for 5 minutes in the film because we did zoom in a lot and did different framings and slow motion. Yeah. And of course this, yeah, there is a question of how far you go with these manipulations. I personally don't like to invent these kind of images. You see a lot of history documentaries where they just manipulate all the pictures and make some kind of interpretation of archive, but I think it adds to the what is it, yeah, authenticity or just the experience that you are watching something that did happen, that you stay close to the originals. Yeah.
Okay, so continuing on this line of thoughts, that my first question would have been that, like, so this documentary humanizes Teunissen, but without excusing him what he did, and you maintain this tension between understanding and the moral judgment. And how did you like achieve that balance structurally? So, what choices in the editing or sequencing help you walk that thin line?
Yeah. I think it was already in the original interview that the historian that asks the question is a very polite interviewer. So he is not attacking Teunissen. He is really just asking questions and as an historian, kind of distant. And this also worked, I think, for that interview because Teunissen didn't feel that he was under attack. So he talks a lot about these things that you might suspect him to be ashamed of, but at some point he starts boasting and really talking about his good contacts with Himmler and Goebbels and these kind of things. I think he wouldn't have told if he felt that he was being criticized from the first moment on. And then the other thing is more structural in the editing. I worked together with Sander Vos, who is a really good Dutch editor, and we were looking at this balance on what do we discover also as an audience at what time. And of course, in the end of the film, we're not easy on him. So you get to see also in the trial the awful things that he did. But we wanted to postpone the moral judgment throughout the film to be able to look at him not right away from a moral judgment and to see, and it's not, the point is not to humanize him, but more to be in a conversation with somebody whom we know already didn't make these choices that he made, but to force yourself for a while to listen to it and to see what his motivation is. And of course, if we would have started out with the trial, I think you lose also all sympathy that is left for him. So it's a problem for the film if you would start out with this. You don't feel like listening to him anymore. No. And then also, I think it's a experience that you could have also in reality. No, that you're people won't always tell you about the things that they did. So there is some suspense in that you talk with somebody or you're in conversation with somebody whom you know that is not really a trustworthy interviewee. So I think that brings the tension in the film that he is saying things like, maybe I am too social. And as an audience, you can think, well, is that really the case? Or so, yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, the film has this highly observational and deeply reflective side. So yeah, in one hand, it immerses us in these archival footages, letting history speak for itself. And the other hand, you have these reactions with the analysis and the film historians, which shape how we interpret what we see throughout from the beginning of the film. So, did your choice to include these historians meant to serve as a counter narrative to Teunissen?
And yes, I think it was a way of breaking a little bit, breaking into his story, because at first my idea was to make a film exclusively with the audio archive and the film archive. But at some points in the film, you do feel that he is untrustworthy, that you need to have an outside perspective from him because he is saying a lot of things that you could doubt. And you're like, is it really true? And so instead of really countering him with facts, I thought at some point it was interesting also to see the faces of the historians looking back at the tapes because they are mostly reflective, and in the small emotions in the faces you can already detract, of course, the criticism that they have, or when Teunis is saying something that you can feel is like, what is he saying? And I think it helps to identify with a perspective outside of Teunis's perspective, and it also adds well, some kind of humanity and also some comical reactions. And what was interesting to me was also that the older historian Schuursma, when he listened back to the tapes, he was actually a bit more shocked to hear them than in his memory. He thought at first when we talked about Teunissen and brought him up, he was like, yeah, he was just one of these like small fish, a collaborator, and but it was quite a normal guy. And then when he listened back to the tapes, he was quite shocked by the racism and just the tone of Teunissen. So I think that was also good to feel in the film that sometimes we put a little bit of a blanket on history and we talk about gray tones a lot, and there is no pure good and evil. And I think here you can at some point feel that there is, of course, not only gray tones, but there is also black in some decisions and the actions that people do.
Okay. In one of the audio recordings, Tennyson claimed that it's a primal instinct to look up to Victor. And so he was a conformist. And the film shows how he merged his filmmaking ambitions with the regime's needs and becoming what Hannah Arendt would call banal in his evil. And so, was it planned from the beginning to explore this psychological angle, or did it emerge it as you worked through your material?
Yeah, I think it was the latter, because firstly, I was interested in the theme of propaganda and how propaganda works. So that was my initial attraction to this material, and also the kind of people that make the propaganda. It was just something that you can wonder about who is making these images or who lends himself, which artists that are supporting, of course, the expansion of these regimes. But this last part became bigger, I think, mostly because of the interview. It has this kind of why done it question where the historian is asking him all these questions, but it's also like a circle around Teune. So he comes back to the question, why did you do it? Why did you offer your help to this brutal regime? and I think you're right. Also, Hannah Arendt, while making the film, came up a lot because she describes also this class of more opportunistically driven, ambitious people that may not be ideologically driven so much, but are just thinking also about their own careers and are so ambitious that they are mostly not thinking about their own role and their own responsibility. And so throughout making the film, I think this psychological question became bigger. Yeah.
I think we can move on to our next
The
question.
last, but that is my last question. Okay, so then for a contemporary note that the film shows one man, so Teunissen, with this institutional power and the technical skill, so creating propaganda. And today it's not only this centralized broadcast, but millions of people share content instantly, and then then the responsibility feels more diffused. And what do you think about that? Does that change the nature of complicity?
That's a difficult question, and I don't feel also that I am an expert in this field, but I think you are right in that it has become more diffuse and more complex even than before. I think already then the propagandists were a little bit hidden from sight, so they weren't, in the Netherlands at least, they weren't public figures. But now there are so many channels and there are so many strategies of propaganda that you easily get lost. I think one of the things that we see right now, what happens a lot is that the strategy is what Steve Bannon calls flooding the zone with shit, which is just putting as much disinformation out as possible. Um, and so I think it's harder to figure out what the message is and also what it's coming from. And of course this is being studied, but I would say there is a big task for investigative journalists here to see who are influencing politics where. And it's, I think, almost 6 or 7 years there was this case of Cambridge Analytica, which then it was proven that there were social media companies influencing local politics. And I must say, in the last election, we didn't hear so much about it anymore, as if it's disappeared. And I think it's the opposite. I think it's become even more so. I think it's also the cause why extreme right and right-wing populists are growing, because they are good at this game of attention. And I think they are better at playing this game in this economy of media where it's a lot about attention seeking and yeah, so in that sense we are a bit doomed because I think some people that are cynical are better at controlling these mechanisms. um, yeah. But then
Yeah, so
again, I mean, there is, I think the other thing is that there is a lot of resemblances when you look at political campaigns, also in the Netherlands now, a lot of the old cliches that maybe were after the war a bit tainted and people were less sure about the nationalist cliches in the Netherlands, for example, the seafarers and this whole longing back to the great history of the Netherlands. It's really like small country complex. When suddenly people in the Netherlands are thinking that they are the greatest people in the world, and you're like, what is this? But this is a big growing movement again. And I think not only in the Netherlands, but you see this in many places. So that's the tragical part, is also that these images that are such a limited amount of cliches are still very functional, and just the whole we against them narrative. There are a lot of similarities with, of course, with the 1930s and 1940s, and many people are aware of this, but still it's hard to criticize it because it's growing rapidly and it still works. So, yeah.
yeah, so I think that's all our questions, right? Yeah. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the interesting questions, and good luck at the festival also.
Thank
Thanks.
you.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Cheers.